reduction of SNAP, 230 billion. And so we're closely monitoring the potential government shutdown and all of the ramifications that that would have, as well as these proposed SNAP cuts. That government shutdown would happen tomorrow if it happens. I think that there is currently, I think like in the last couple of hours, there was a continuing Democratic proposal of a continuing resolution for a month. The impact on that SNAP reduction on all of the people that many of you serve, all of us are in community with, would be immense and would impact local economies as well as folks who actually need that food. So it's a very concerning cut. We do expect there to be a level of cuts, whether it's that 230 or not. I think it probably will be less than that because that's kind of the trend of when something leaves the House and enters the Senate. But at this time, we do really encourage everyone to contact their senators specifically right now. And so I'm going to drop a link. Let me grab my little highlight for you guys to, at this point, I bet all of you know how to do this immediately, but to contact your members of Congress, your representatives, your senators to advocate against those cuts, or advocate for them to be as little as humanly possible. We have had some footing in the past with Cassidy's office in not making those cuts. We're not making them as deeply. And I think that if any of you have the ability to speak from first and foremost, we're always going to want to speak from an economic perspective right now, because that's the thing that seems to grab their attention the most. But speaking about the health impacts to a doctor can be impactful, and we have seen him move occasionally on some of that stuff. And then also speaking to the impacts that has on local farmers seems to have some footing as well. If any of you all work for organizations that you have questions about your ability to like advocate or lobby, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach out directly to me or to Alyssa to find out more about how you can use your institutional voice, but each and every one of you is able to use your individual voice to make those calls today. The other thing would be like what the shutdown impact is on SNAP. So if a shutdown does occur, SNAP is mandatory funding, so it'll continue to be funded at its current federal level, and those March payments would still happen in March. What would be up in the air and we really can't know perfectly about, I bet you there will be some like insider pieces that come out tomorrow that might give us greater clarity if this shutdown actually looks like it's going to happen, or gets more definite, would be the potential of April payments not happening. In the past, if as long as the USDA is able to like transmit those payments to like make the administrative payments happen, then the payments actually happen to people. But we are concerned about the reduction in staffing at the USDA and like general administrative staffing reduction and how that could impact the actual ability to disperse the payments. So while the payments themselves are mandatory funding and that funding would still be around, it's more of the implementation and like logistical administrative, like how does money hit bank accounts in April is what we would be more concerned about. But that is a bridge that we will have to cross if we get there. On that note, the next thing I'm going to drop into the chat is a link to our survey about the impacts of federal funding freezes. Thank you, Sam. So we have this federal changes survey that was developed by our team, and it's to be able to advocate now and in the future. We have to know exactly how the funding freezes are affecting anyone in the entire food system. So we've had responses from community gardens that get small federal grants. We've had responses from federal employees who want to keep their response private. And we will absolutely keep your responses anonymous. It is not in the best interest of any of us to revoke any of that anonymity. So Sam has dropped that link into the chat, but we need as much data on this as we can possibly have, because it helps us advocate for how these impacts are being felt on the ground, because they're all theoretical to our lawmakers until they hear, oh, a farmer in my district or a family in my district or a beloved nonprofit in my district actually is losing funding food, the ability to run programming that's like broadly popular. Those are the things that we can actually bring to the people that make these choices. And so filling out that survey is really important right now. And also I would just like to remind everyone, like, we need a narrative of what happened here. When things move quickly in times of distress, it's often easy to look back on them like a blur and not be able to take the learnings from them into the next moment. So by really cataloging and remembering and slowing down what was happening at the beginning of COVID, we're better able to move confidently in these moments where it somewhat feels like the beginning of COVID again, and be like, oh, we're not going to remember what happened one week to another. So we need this data from you guys. We learned that the last time there was a big crisis, and it helps us be better proactive than reactive. I will be clear, like, we have had farmers market funding cut in the state, and I want to respect anonymity, and like, I'm sure that those changes will show. We have had farmers market funding cut substantially at some Louisiana farmers markets, up to $100,000. That obviously impacts communities' ability to get fresh local food, and we've had USDA staff cut. And now I'm going to move into state updates, because there are some pretty substantial federal updates that trickle down to the state level. As many of you who work in nutrition and some of you who work in ag may have heard, late Friday, we did receive notice, or like our partners who work in ag, specifically AMS, Agricultural Marketing Service, funded ag projects, did receive word that LFPA 2025, or LFPA 25 as it's called, is cut. LFPA 25 is the local food purchasing agreement that was a continuation on the initial program, which is called like LFPA, a secondary program called LFPA Plus. This was the 2025 allocation of funding for that LFPA. I'll explain what that program was in a minute for anyone who's not familiar. In that same cut, it's also Louisiana Farm to School, or not Louisiana Farm to School as the program. Sorry, Crystal, if that sounded scary, but it is the funding for Farm to School, LFS, that was cut. We have an $11 million cut in funding for the state of Louisiana. These are federal cuts. This is the local impact of those federal cuts. Really notably, $4 million of childcare, early childcare funding was cut in those cuts. This would have been the first year that childcare ECE was part of that farm to school work. So it didn't even get to happen, didn't even get out the gate. New Orleans FPAC has been doing really great work on connecting ECEs to local food, and this would have been building on that. And so what this means is the LFPA, the Local Food Purchasing Agreement, was a program where our food banks were empowered through money to be able to purchase from local farmers. That $11 million is for local food for schools and childcare centers. Thanks. Crystal sent me that clearer language. So that's the impact on that local food for schools and childcare centers. And so anyway, where I was going with this is that LFPA funding was the funding some of you all might be familiar with, that allowed our food banks, basically as a sort of trickle down funding, first given to Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry, which they were then distributing to Feeding Louisiana, which Feeding Louisiana then distributed to each of its constituent food banks to make local purchases. It totaled about $7 million in its first year. And the purchases that they were making from farmers, though I know there were critiques on how that program was sometimes administered, were really impactful on a lot of our rural farmers. We saw farmers quit their day jobs and go into straight farming. We saw farmers pay off past debts. So this was a meaningful program to do purchasing from Louisiana farmers and get that food directly to the communities that were accessing our food banks here in Louisiana. And that funding is now all cut. A tiny technicality with that is that LFPA 25 was not able to be dispersed until LFPA 1 and LFPA Plus were dispersed. And so in Louisiana, LFPA plus, LFPA 1 and LFPA plus are not going to be done being dispersed until June 30th. So that means some of our food banks actually still have that money to be making purchases, more in the northern region of the state. But so some of those purchases will continue until the summer, until like July. And so we won't see that impact just yet, but we won't be getting another tranche of that money. And so our farmers will not be able to have that sort of stabilized built-in market. And we're expecting to see some pretty broad impacts on the food system. There was a rumor that RFSI, which is the Regional Food Systems Infrastructure grant funding, which was similarly distributed from the federal level to the state as a competitive grant made to individual farms to purchase after farm gates infrastructure, that was going to be cut. We have not actually heard that substantiated anywhere, though the state hasn't communicated with farmers about it. We do not think that is currently cut. That is the kind of thing that if you have any intel or any direct impact in your life for a farmer that you know and love, please get them to fill out that survey. We need to be able to watch that closely because it was a reimbursement grant. So that means that a lot of the farmers that all of us work with and care about actually made those purchases already. And so if that funding is cut, we will have farmers who are holding bills that they expected to be reimbursed on. So we're just really sending energy to the sky, praying whatever it is that you do, that money does come through. And we currently have no reason to believe that it won't. I just wanted to note that in Louisiana, we're continuing to think really intersectionally about how all of these cuts and all of the food safety and food regulation and food security cuts that are happening, how those are intersecting with environmental and climate law rollbacks. So I just want to like reassure everyone that is very much where our head is at Louisiana FPAC. And the next thing is just that we have legislative session coming up. So as a quick reminder, this legislative session is a budget-focused session. So what that means is that lawmakers can only introduce 5 non-budgetary bills. All of the rest of their bills have to be focused on the budget, and they can also only file 5 late bills. Tomorrow is the due date for filing bills. For filing early bills. After that, they would be late bills. And remember, they can only file 5 late bills and only 5 non-budget bills. So that's 5 non-budget bills total. It doesn't matter if they're late or early. It is important to note that we have some creative lawmakers who might try to make interesting things budgetary. But those are the rules that we're playing with right now. And LAFPAC will continue to be tracking that really closely and playing whack-a-mole, as Alyssa has always liked to say. I like to say I'm glued to my refresh button and just making sure I know everything that's coming up. But we'll be watching that. And then on the state level, there is also a potential for SNAP to move from DCFS via legislative session to, I believe it's workforce development. And we can't really know what the long-term impacts of that are. But if that were to happen, I think there's a clear narrative case there that it moves SNAP from being a way to protect children and families to being like a sort of carrot to incentivize work, which further rolls SNAP back from like a social safety net. And so that could have serious consequences for folks who rely on it. And I think that is essentially the end of our state and federal updates. I'd like to just quickly see if there's any additional insight, wisdom, or correction from anyone in the room that is from one of these impacted agencies. Doesn't need to be, but just want to make sure that we're like sharing and bringing together the very best and most up-to-date information. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share at this time?
It can be questions, feelings.
Yeah, questions or feelings are also important. Oh, I will add one thing, which is food adjacent. We have seen one of the few bills that we do know is already filed is a defluoridation of the water bill. That's obviously like it is food adjacent, but I wanted to make sure everyone knew that it is on our radar because it is about health and nutrition and our teeth. If anyone has any specific questions about the legislative session or any of the things that I've discussed, please get in touch with me. I'll drop my email.
Christy came off of mute and then Megan.
Yes. Can you elaborate a little more about the fluoridation bill? What you just mentioned? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's personally, I think it's unlikely to pass. But there is a bill that has been introduced to remove fluoride from Louisiana's drinking water, which would impact dental health. And so because water and food are somewhat adjacent, we did want to mention it. As I understand it, I don't know exactly, there are water specialists, and I think there might be somebody in here who's a water person. But that we do still probably receive some fluoride in our water through because it's groundwater, it's naturally occurring element. But so this would be a removal of fluoride, which is an element that keeps your teeth strong, from our drinking water.
My question was piggybacking on that. I didn't know if you knew who filed that. I can find it, but
Yeah,
just if you knew off the top of your head.
It's Big Mike
Okay.
Fessy from Homa. Yeah,
Got it. Got it.
Homa,
Great.
it's the Homa bill.
Thank you.
I just want to do a quick pulse check on what Margie has been sharing. Are these things that you all are already aware of and we're sort of reiterating, or is this new information for the most part for y'all? Just wanted to get a sense, and you can drop in the chat if that's helpful. We just want to make sure that we are, we will continue to reiterate and emphasize these, but we also can open the space for those who might have a little bit more information on some of these bills or updates. Cool. Awesome. Thank y'all.
And I just want to say in closing, if you're ever feeling anxiety on a state level and you want to just reach out to me because you heard something, I think it's always, especially when information is moving so fast right now, it's helpful for us to be able to play whack-a-mole. I'll use that analogy again. So if you hear something and we just want to track it down together, that's totally valid.
Cool. And then I'll just also mention that we are about to engage in our own policy tracking system, and making sure that that is readily available to you all if you want to have access to that. So please stay tuned on the newsletter. We'll of course share it via these meetings. But if you have a policy tracking system or a spreadsheet that you're like, this is amazing, I use it every year, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us, that would be very helpful. Otherwise, we've got some systems down. So I'm always in the spirit of improvement and sharing. So with that, we have a few local updates. So I just wanted to share that the Grace at the Office of Resilience and Sustainability is hosting office hours for urban ag support. So if you are an urban farmer, gardener, or if you're having trouble navigating city processes like permitting, sewage and water board, land access, etc., we invite you to please fill out this form, and then you can follow up by reaching out directly to Grace via email or phone. Grace is thankfully here, and I did not warn you that I was adding this. So Grace, I invite you to share any additional information if you'd like. Otherwise, no pressure at all.
Yeah, hey y'all, no worries. Thanks, Sam, for plugging this. Please feel free to fill it out. I have been checking it daily. I will be real with y'all. Microsoft is not my friend and the system is complicated, but I have figured it out for the most part. And so I've been checking this. If you submitted a request, there are a few that it took me a while to get to because I couldn't find them, but I found them. So please, if there are any issues you've had with the city or just things you want to brainstorm around urban ag and permitting and land access and things like that, I'm working on various things. I dropped the short link in the chat for the new page on the city's website. If there's anything you think should be added to that, or just yeah, would love to people to reach out, and you can email or call me.
Okay, lovely. We will collectively, as a group, brainstorm in our strategic planning any more local updates as it pertains to food together. I have not seen anything recently, so I open the floor in case anyone knows. Um, just want to make sure. Okay. So now we're entering sort of like the active piece of our meeting today. We have about a little less than 30 minutes, but I think it'll give us a little bit of time. So as just like a preview into what FPAC has been talking about, and I say FPAC because this is New Orleans and Louisiana, as we've been collaborating and chatting, is that we anticipate a pretty defensive approach to our policy work, holding the line, as Alyssa would say. A lot of things are being put on the chopping block. A lot of things are being defunded, unfunded, destroyed, dismantled. And so we are going to do our best at all levels to ensure that, well, mostly at the state and federal level, which will eventually affect local level, to ensure that those things are mitigated as much as possible. But long-term strategy, I want us to continue to plan and dream for a better generative system. Oh, thank you, Margie. In case y'all haven't seen in the chat, just a quick update that there is continuing resolution to keep SNAP at current level until September, so that's good. We'll know soon. And I know that FRAC has been continuing to, this is the Food Research Action Center. It's continuing to do a lot of SNAP advocacy, and has a media kit in case that is something that you are interested in posting on your social medias and stuff. But yes, so we want to continue to plan and dream for a better food system. I know that is a difficult ask given our current environment. So we're going to do that very slowly and incrementally over the course of our many meetings. But for our first sort of like brainstorming planning session, I really want to open the floor around opportunities for advocating. I know many of you are part of organizations that can engage in lobbying or advocacy as you may think of advocacy. We will be hosting a session on like what nonprofits can do in terms of advocacy, but just know that FPAC is here to do the lobbying and advocacy as well, to the extent that you all can't, because we are able to. So first, I'd like to pose a few questions for you all and then break you out into random groups to discuss a little bit further. But I just want you all to take a moment to reflect individually. What are the opportunities that you all are aware of as individuals or organizations in terms of advocating? So, for example, FPAC is planning at the federal level to go to a lobby day in DC while we're at the National Anti-Hunger Conference, sorry. At the state level, we intend to go to the lobby days that many of your organizations may already be organizing. So for example, on April 30th, Feeding Louisiana is hosting a day at the Capitol, and we intend to be there because the agenda aligns with the work that we are doing. I know there's also an opportunity with the American Heart Association on May 7th, and those are opportunities in which we will plan on being in front of policymakers and legislators to talk about some of the things that we would like to advocate for. And then at the local level here in New Orleans, a few opportunities that I've identified is elections. We are in an election year. We have a mayoral and city council elections. All of them are up for re-election. Plus, city budget annually is an opportunity to advocate for certain things. So I just want to take a moment to just allow you all to kind of ingest that and what other opportunities are you aware of to advocate for our food system? Eric, I saw you came off mute. Would you like to?
Um, yeah, I think you know, at the state level, as far as business development goes, and this is something I don't think we've discussed too much at the strategic planning sessions, but looking at like, especially with the tax revamping, things like that are kind of outside of I guess kind of typically what we've looked at. But there's a lot of implications, with taxes and other changes at that level that I think might be um, worth looking at for businesses and entrepreneurs.
Cool. I'm just going to be dropping a few of those notes as you all say them in the chat. Anyone else want to add? You all will continue to have these conversations in your groups. I just want to get a sense if there's anything that's coming to mind now at any of these levels. Okay, cool. And then at each of these levels, I've also posed some questions that you all can consider in groups. So at the federal level, we're thinking about what conversations are we hoping to have with federal level stakeholders. Like I said, we will be going to DC in May. And so I know that Margie, Alyssa, Devin are going to start shaping those conversations and agendas for what we are hoping to talk about. But if you have plans to go to DC, I'd love to know what conversations you plan on having. If you're not and cannot, what conversations do you wish you could have? So that we can kind of collaborate and start thinking about what we can work together on. And then at the state level, what lobbying days are you planning? Either if you're planning them yourself, or what days are you planning on going, and what conversations are you hoping to have at the state level? And then at the local level, what do you want your candidates to focus on as it pertains to the food system? We plan on circulating a survey to all of the candidates. They have until July to register, so we'll be planning it up until then, circulating it for your feedback. But I think it's a good opportunity now to start thinking about what questions do you want us to pose to them? What do you want them to focus on? So these are the questions, and I'm hoping you all will be able to chat about in breakout. And I appreciate I'm just checking the chat. At the local level, improved permits in the permits process, absolutely. Cool. And then it seems like Grace is already also working on that. Reducing food waste in grocery stores. Love that. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. And how many of us are here? Mhm. All right. So I am gonna let you all choose which room to go in. I just want you all to be in pairs, and then I'll do another round where you're in quads. But if there's someone you are vying to chat with about this, I think jump in a room with them. If that person has already been taken, choose another person. But we're gonna try it this way and see how it goes. So choose a room. Is everyone able to see the breakout rooms?
No, do you want me to start rooms, Sam?
Hold on, let me try again. I just threw y'all in.
I think that's best. Send us.
All right, you all will have about 6 minutes. Hunter, are you able to join that room?